Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi. ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا وسندنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ربي زدني علما وارزقني فهما. My dear brothers, sisters, young ones, elder ones, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah, MashaAllah. Welcome to another episode of Your Health, our healthcare program that dwells on medical issues and strategies for well-being and other information that will, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, benefit you and I. Alhamdulillah. As you know, this body is a trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a vessel which we utilize in our short time on this planet to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People who have arthritis or fibromyalgia or rheumatoid or other muscular issues, then they know how much of a constriction and restriction they go by. They can't perform salah. They can hardly walk without, severe pain. So by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to look after our health so we can please Allah ta'ala by worshipping Him. It's as simple as that. Alhamdulillah. Now, as I've mentioned before, I specialize in homeopathic medicine. Alhamdulillah. For the last 17, 18 years, I've been studying homeopathic medicine up and down the country, in various schools of medicine and colleges of medicine. Alhamdulillah. Now, this is a system which is very natural, which is scientifically proven by the grace of Allah. Over 300 double-blind, placebo-controlled trials vouch for the efficacy and robustness, both scientifically as well as in clinical practice, for homeopathic medicine. Alhamdulillah. It's a gentle system. It's very powerful. It can, help the body heal itself very, very rapidly, gently, without any side effects. Alhamdulillah. So what I'm going to do for the next few weeks, inshallah, is go through the remedies, the first aid remedies in homeopathic medicine. So you can use these in your own house. Many people up and down the country, indeed, around the globe, utilize these remedies for their own kind of, ailments. So we're going to start with, there's a whole kind of map I've charted out. We'll start with the basic remedies first, and then we'll go to different remedies. We'll go to remedies from different botanical families, like the Ranunculales and the Roganaceae, different families of plants from which homeopathic remedies are produced. Today we're going to speak about, hopefully, we'll try to do 3 remedies, but if you can do 2, I'll still be very pleased. And these are known as the ABC remedies. ABC. A for aconite, excuse me, B for belladonna, and C for chamomilla. The ABC of homeopathic medicines. These remedies, these trio of remedies are amazing. Many a time, they can, absolutely nip a cold, an influenza, a sore throat, otitis media, ear infections, kind of a throat infection, tonsillitis, etc. in the bud. Within the first few hours, if you take these remedies, some remedies like aconite, for instance, you take that within 24 hours, and by the grace of Allah, if you've been caught out in the cold, for instance, the winters, autumn's coming, winter is very, very, it's around the corner. So let's say you've been out in the cold and the temperatures have kind of dropped even more, and you've actually become open to some colds. You've been caught to exposure to cold winds or to rain, etc. So now the body has become chilled. So what normally happens after you become chilled is your body starts to produce a temperature. And often is the case with children who are very healthy. It's a sudden temperature. Your kind of face becomes very, very red. You may develop a runny nose. You go home and you feel very, very hot, and the fever begins, and you have to go to bed. So if you take these remedies, by the grace of Allah, you'll wake up feeling absolutely wonderful, better than before. If you don't, then you will have to run the gamut of all the colds or the flu symptoms or the ear symptoms, etc. That's just one, scenario. Other scenario, a child's woken up from sleep and he's got a severe earache and he's crying and he's in pain. Give him one of these remedies, normally belladonna, and within moments the child falls back to sleep. Alhamdulillah, no more disturbances, and he wakes up absolutely fine. A third scenario, a child is teething. Poor child, he's got a temperature, his tooth is coming out very, very slowly, it's very, very painful, he's got a high fever, he's got diarrhea, he's very, very irritable, or she's very, very irritable. If you give him a remedy called chamomilla, that child will fall asleep again within moments, within seconds, if not minutes, alhamdulillah, and he will be, in no pain. So these are the ABC. So these three remedies, aconite, belladonna, chamomilla, we're going to talk about these and explain how they work, all three of the remedies, they have, they cause kind of, how should I explain it? The word is turmoil. They cause turmoil. Aconite, belladonna, chamomilla. Aconite causes turmoil in the circulation. The remedy aconite. Okay, belladonna causes turmoil in the brain because it pulls and the blood is pushed to the head. So you see these patients with very, very hot heads and radiating heat and very, very irritable and extremely, angry. If you jar their bed or the light comes to them, they get really angry because of this, turmoil in the circulation, especially in the head. Belladonna. And the third, chamomilla, which has turmoil in its temperament, meaning that the child, it's a teething remedy, chamomilla. So if a child teething, can you imagine what will happen? He's angry, his nose is running, he maybe has diarrhea and he's very frustrated and in pain. So turmoil in the temperament. So these three remedies we're going to discuss today, inshallah. So if we go to slide number 1, you can see these three remedies. These are common childhood remedies: aconite, belladonna, and chamomilla. These are for, they're not just for children's ailments, please don't get me wrong. These are general, in homeopathic medicine you have a remedy with a symptom picture, all the way from the head to the feet, including the emotions and the mental, sometimes even dreams. And the homeopathic physician has to match the symptoms to the person. So these aren't just for children, they're good for everybody, but the symptoms have to match. And normally in children, because children are very healthy, you get this sudden, vivid, clear picture which these three have. So children's ailments which can appear suddenly, violently. What I mean by violently means that it's very, very powerful. The symptom picture comes very, very powerfully. If they have a fever, it's very high, 37, 38. If they have a headache, they have a severe headache. If they have a fever, the fever is very, very high. Pain is severe. So suddenness. It's a sign of a healthy immune system, sign of a healthy organism which has, sudden symptoms. Many people are so ill, they can't even have colds. Like, example, people with AIDS, Allah keep everybody safe, they're so ill that they can't even have colds because the body is so weak. Other people, example, certain ladies who are very, very weak, they're just too weak to even conceive. They can't have children because they're too weak. The body won't allow them to have children because they're so weak. So to have symptoms which are very, very sudden and very, very powerful, it's a sign that your body is trying to heal itself. And in homeopathic medicine, we don't suppress it with paracetamol or these things, because that is going against the rules and principles of nature, unless it's very, very severe and it's a medical emergency, obviously. So homeopathic medicine works with the body and gently brings healing. So yeah, children's ailments which can appear suddenly, violently, and with inflammation and high temperature, these three are the most common remedies which we use. So slide number 2, the first remedy was aconite, which has turmoil in the circulation, as I mentioned. Turmoil in the circulation, so the whole circulatory system is in turmoil, hands and feet are cold, etc. And the reason why it's so effective is that because it works on the autonomous nervous system. Yeah? Autonomous nervous system, where you have the hormones, the fight and flight response. So in this remedy, when we'll go through it, you'll see it either freezes in kind of fear, or it's just so irritable and it's so restless. And you'll see these in all the symptoms that it has. This is why aconite is a major panic attack remedy. Major panic attack remedy. People who need aconite, you see these people, they think they're going to die. Sometimes they even say, look, we're going to die at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. They run to the door, they open their, the buttons, and they want to breathe air in. They want to run. This is why this is a very good remedy, one of the remedies for heart attacks. A big remedy, there's many remedies. It's one of the remedies for a heart attack and high blood pressure, because the person is so scared of death. That's one of the keynotes of this aconite is fear of death. They're terrified they're going to die. So aconite, remember this, for all kind of panic situations. It's a good claustrophobia remedy, a good remedy for people who have fears of flying, a general fearful remedy. But we'll go into each one, inshallah, in depth. Number 2, belladonna. So this is the ABC, the very famous remedies. You can use these at home in the 30C potency, even a bit higher if you're slightly more confident, if you know the picture. Number 2, belladonna. Belladonna has turmoil in the brain. The first one has turmoil in circulation, aconite. Yeah? That's why you get hands and feet cold. Sometimes one cheek is red, other one is cold. Sometimes they're very hot, but when they sit up in their bed, they become very pale. We'll go through the symptoms. A main remedy to stop panic attacks, to take away this fear, and also a big remedy when you're exposed to cold, or for even when you're exposed to emotional shocks. You've had bad news, someone's passed away, X, Y, Z. Your body goes into a shock. When you have a shock, your blood circulation is impaired. This remedy keeps the blood going because it works on the autonomous nervous system. Belladonna is number 2 remedy, has turmoil in the brain because it draws blood into the brain. What happens with belladonna? It's got heat, it's radiating, so much so that when you touch the person, after a while when you move with the hand, you still feel the heat on your hand. It's such a hot remedy. Let's say you've got a small wound, the body is sending oxygen to this area with its nutrients, with the repair units of red cells and white cells. There's a lot of heat, a lot of congestion, a lot of throbbing. That's belladonna. That's why belladonna is a very big remedy for fevers and children specifically who are teething. And the third remedy, chamomile, has turmoil in the temperament, meaning that the person is very angry because it works on the emotional level. So your classical teething remedy is chamomile. This remedy, if you remember this ABC, it'll help you so much with your children, especially if you have small children who are teething, who are prone to colds, coughs within the first 4 or 5 years of their life. ABC will be a lifesaver for you, and more often than not, in fact, many occasions, it'll abort the issue if it's a fever or a middle ear infection or teething within seconds with one dose. So let's first of all talk about aconite. If you go to slide number 3, inshallah. Aconite. Aconite is look at the picture of this kind of a bud. Yeah, it's called monk's hood. This monk's hood. In fact, let's go to slide 4, shall we? And we'll go through the name first of all. So, if you look at slide 4, you can see the Latin name for this remedy is Aconite napellus. The common name for this remedy is called monk's hood. And the reason why it's called monk's hood, if you saw the first picture, and even this picture, you can see the shape of the flower is like a hood that monk kind of wear, So that's why they call it monk's hood. Wolf's bane as well, because it's very poisonous to wolves. This is why you can't even use this below third decimal potency, because it's toxic. But because it's prepared homeopathically, it's wonderfully safe because it's been diluted so many times. But below 3x, you can't use this. And this is the magic of homeopathic medicine, that things which are poisonous, when they're prepared homeopathically, they are completely safe to take for children, for elderly, for young people. It's the most safest medicine bar none in the world. So this is the family of this is the Ranunculataceae family. Aconite is from the Ranunculataceae family. There's other remedies from this as well. And where does it normally grow? In all kind of damp and shady forests. And as mentioned before, should never be used below the 3rd decimal potency. So now every remedy has a essence. All right. Now before we go to the essence, let's go to slide number 3 and just give you a small idea of where the picture of this amazing remedy lies. So aconite nips a cold in the bud. You'll only be a believer in this if you try it. But you know, alhamdulillah, summa alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah, many times when I've been up in these mountains, whether it's in Wales or Scotland or, you know, Switzerland, even wherever it may be, you know, with my children, alhamdulillah, and they've been caught out in the cold. I'm talking about winter in the highlands of Scotland, you know, very cold. You can almost guarantee that if you're in this cold for more than a few hours, or even half an hour sometime, you'll go home and you will definitely have caught a cold. You may have a severe earache. You may have, you know, you might get the cold influenza symptoms. You'll definitely staying in for a few days. However, if you had taken a dose of aconite 24 hours before, within 24 hours of that cold, or indeed before you ventured out in the cold, then by the grace of Allah, and surely and utterly because of the grace of Allah and the shifa Allah Ta'ala has put in these certain, you know, medicines, you will be absolutely fine. And it's so amazing when you see this. You know, children who go out in the cold and you're expecting them to get a fever, a cold, and I'm sure you've experienced it. Your children being out in the cold somewhere, they've been out longer than they should, it's very cold, they don't have a hat. And you know what happens? Their face becomes red, their noses start to trickle, they come home, they start coughing, and then before you know it, you've got a full-blown cold. And those children who are susceptible, their colds leads to influenzas or middle ear infections or other tonsillitis, etc., etc. This remedy, by the grace of Allah, is the solution. So, nips a cold in the bud. The reason why it nips a cold in the bud is because it's massively anti-inflammatory. It stops the process of inflammation within 24 hours if you take it. So number 2, it's good for exposure. What happens in exposure? You've had a shock, your body's warm, you've been out in the cold. Now that shock can apply to you in an anxiety attack. You've had some bad news, someone's passed away, you've been involved in a car crash, other things. You are in a shock, your blood circulation is impaired. This remedy, aconite, is the most eminent homeopathic remedy to stop these anxiety attacks. Alhamdulillah. So an amazing, I mean, in this COVID-19 time, if you remember, how many people, you know, I was reading a few days ago, you know, children, there's over 600,000 children in the UK who've been referred to the mental health specialists for mental health issues and issues of depression. 600,000, ya Allah. 6 लाख बच्चों को कोविड-19 के ज़माने के अंदर जो घबराहट और तकलीफ़ और एंग्जाइटी की यानी बीमारियां जो उनको शुरू हुई हैं, तो 6 और डिप्रेशन 6 लाख बच्चों को रिफ़र किया गया है इन मेंटल हेल्थ स्पेशलिस्ट की तरफ. 6 लाख कहना आसान है. So during this COVID-19, after the COVID-19, this was one of the big remedies I was giving to people. And even now until today, we have people who have got into an anxiety state due to the COVID-19 2 years. Massive. You know, it's had a massive effect on mental health up and down the country, on everybody. Men, children, teenagers. How many children have grown up, you know, for 2 years and their development is so impaired because for 2 years they've not been able to see the lips and the vocal movements of lips of other adults. And that's how you learn how to speak. Some are reading, some children's IQ has dropped by, you know, double digits because of the lack of, you know, communication or seeing other adults. For 2 years, newborn children were not couldn't see other people because of their masks. So 600,000 children being referred for depression and mental health disorders just in the UK, not worldwide. You know, it's absolutely phenomenal. So this is a very big remedy for anxiety where you've had a shock. It doesn't matter what kind of shock it is. If you've had a shock, specifically if it's an emotional shock, because this remedy, as I mentioned before, acts on the semi-autonomous nervous system. So if you had a shock, emotional shock, this is the remedy that will help you. So good for anxiety attacks, good for shocks, good for fever. It's good for fever because it deals with the inflammatory process. It nips it in the bud. Claustrophobia, again, you're in a lift and you're feeling terrified. You've got all these, ideas into your head. You may have seen some movies where people get stuck in the lift. In fact, I had a patient a few days ago and she had claustrophobia. So I don't know what went over me, but I just mentioned to her, oh yes, there was something in the news about a lady and her daughter who was stuck in a lift in between floors for about 8 hours. They couldn't hear them, bichara, because they were in between floors. So it's a good remedy for claustrophobia. Earache, amazing remedy. ABC, the ABC of homeopathic medicines: aconite, belladonna, chamomilla. We're talking about Aconitum napellus, common name monkshood and wolfsbane. This is an amazing remedy for claustrophobia, for earache and croup. You know, sometime if your child's been caught outside in the cold, in the winter, autumn, in the wind, because a strong northerly wind will do this. It'll cause the inflammatory process to start. So many children, as I mentioned, are caught in the cold. They come home, their noses start to trickle, they get hot, even more hotter, the temperature goes high, and then the next day, if the fever hasn't broken, they've not taken this remedy, they'll have a high fever state. They will start to cough, and the cough will slowly start building up into like a croupy cough. When your epiglottitis gets inflamed, it's known as epiglottitis. When that inflames, you cough, and if you've heard children coughing, it sounds like a barking of a dog or a seal's bark. It's a deep, really deep cough. It sounds like someone's, using a saw to cut pine. You can hear that deep cough. So for that, there's 3 remedies actually. The first one is aconite, second is spongia, and third is hepasulf. ASH, aconite, spongia, and hepasulf. But generally, if you give it quick enough, aconite will get rid of that cough. So that's known as a croup, where the epiglottis is inflamed. It's a medical emergency, to be honest with you. If you go to the GP, they'll give you steroids. But sometimes it's not the epiglottis, it's just the cold and the narrowing of the airways which makes it sound like a croup. It's not normally a croup, but the cough is very scary. So if that's the case, aconite is the remedy. Also for cystitis, it's a very good remedy for cystitis. Good after emotional shocks. Good if you get a shock from a cold. Symptoms start suddenly and violently. Very suddenly, very violently. Remember that. Suddenness and violentness, this is one of the hallmarks of this remedy, wherever symptom it may be. Dry, red and warm skin. Panic attack and you think you're going to die. Aconite is the remedy. And you're very thirsty for cold drinks and you're worse in the middle of the night. These are the symptoms of aconite. Stay with us, inshallah. After the break, we're going to continue with some more symptoms of aconite, and then we're going to move on to belladonna, and hopefully, if we have time, to chamomilla. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.